Alrighty, and we're live. Go ahead. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the round 2 feature match. It's just me because the lovely Arcane Grove who volunteered is now a no-show, which is kind of Mono's fault for being a big butt trying to schedule things. Bodity has given me permission to start. Why, yes, I have. Go ahead, folks. Do your thing. Okay, so a little explanation for the title. I let the players tell me what they want their decks to be named on the little stream shenanigan. And I can only make moves based on Bod's expertise. Ooh, I wish. You always have like the sauciest shit posts to bug me with in like DB chat when I'm trying to stream. It's okay though. I respond in kind when you're trying to stream. Anyways, I was saying something about the decks. So W Train over here is on vampires or just like zombie piles. There's some Shiranuis and there's the vampires. Some good stuff. But Mono wanted me to call his deck Top 40 because it is the 40 best cards that you can put in a pile in the format. It's fairly similar naming convention to 60 inches. But yeah, so it's control-y, it's good stuffy. He said it was like pacifistless pacifist. All the stuff that was good in that except for the field spell itself, because good players can play around it. Sir, Judge, sir. Well, yes, as you may have noticed, this man is on a, what's this? 45 card deck. So, Mono's just being a whiner. How typical. But yeah, so vampires, they're interesting. It's like they have most of the pieces that they need to actually be functional, but like sort of not quite enough redundancy to actually get there. Then again, sometimes you open one for one and can like pop off with your familiars, but like it's sort of telling that this is a strong dual links level deck. And like of course it's not actually bad here, but we'll see. We'll see. It's not, it's like good. There's potential. Vampire Awakening. Special summon one vampire from your deck, but destroy it during the end phase. Interesting. So it looks like this is just sort of a setup turn. Already at 3 summons, so he can't use these familiars, but having them in grave is pretty strong-o. And looks like playing some sort of Sky Striker package too, with just Rhoda, Ray, and some number of spells maybe, and then the extra deck engine pieces, because there's no need for like deck size increasing commitment there. You can just like splash it and use those. Use the fact that you now run 4 extra Sky Striker cards to include 1 extra copy of an engine card, and you can rely on the Sky Striker cards to like do good things separately from your engine, like when you can just like Rhoda into Ray and do good stuff. So it looks like here is one of the supposed top 40 cards. One of the things about the co-forbidden design space is that you can just sort of, it's like you get a lot of really good cards for your buck there. You can playing like 40 cards with 4 co-forbidden cards and like 6 also good tech options that might be cideable is like scary strong. And you can like mix and match your co-forbidden cards based on their like normal summon requirements and extra deck commitment in a way that lines up really well. So, strong stuff. This is why Gofu, our unlimited friend for so long, could not quite stay there, because Nightmare Strongo plays. However, this Shadow Vampire was tribute summoned, not special summoned, so this Cerberus has to fire off at the retainer. But, getting one loot effect, ooh, yeah, that can be good, especially when you're pitching something that will make it plus. So, let's see. People tuning in. Hi! No one is here. Is it verifiable that is actually the top 40 best cards? No, they're bad. He's not playing Trickstar Candina. I asked him. No, that one's a thinker. I guess he's thinking about, woo! I see what you mean. If that was the card he drew, it's like, rip tour guide right in this banished pile when your Scarm triggers in the end phase. But the idea behind top 40 is definitely sound, I think, sort of in a almost scarily strong way, because in a singleton format, like, every deck that is comprised of archetypes is inherently battling against the fact that you can only play one of each good card unless you start adding more bad cards. And we can even see it already with W-Train. Like, he can play 2 Vampire Familiars, but he has to add unrelated engines like Ray. And if you're already playing unrelated engines like Ray, there's definitely an argument to just, like, play Ray in a smaller deck and, like, not worry about vampire stuff colliding and being bricky. But then again, the payoff of engines can be very strong, so Vampire Awakening into Familiar, it's like 2 chump blockers while not losing card advantage if you can pay however much life it is. But it's good interaction with the summon limit there. Some nice shenanigans going on. And Fraulein is definitely a really good archetypal payoff, because now that was only 2 summons, and this Gaia Saber can no longer beat over that Shadow Vampire, as was the original plan, probably. Well, he can try at least. Oh, that's adorable. I quite agree. Frau. Looks like he'll potentially redeclare into the Fraulein just to get a little life point chip, because none of these getting beat over. Yep. However, knowing that you have to just pass and leave your opponent on a board full of four monsters is like big oof. But then again, maybe one of those, maybe the co-forbidden card to match this Gofu that he's already playing is like a Dark Hole, because Dark Hole is a good card. It's like barely too strong to be at Unlim, but it's also like, it's really powerful, especially in a summon limited format, because as we can see here, Mono can like very efficiently turn this Gofu into threats that deal with a board, but that's it for his summons. Like, so now he has to have, well, that's a good card. He has to have like follow-up spell and trap like based removal to sort of tempo through this, and you sort of like, it's like, yes, he can search that tour guide. Ooh, dodged a bullet not banishing it, but like the tour guide will then take up more of your summons, and if your opponent can like cleanly answer your play while continuing to apply pressure, they can just go faster than you. And I think that's like the only reasonable weakness of this top 40 idea, is like it can be overwhelmed when all of its like consistent, advantageous, like play like monster-based plays that chain into each other, like even just Tour Guide into Scar or Sangan into Wee Witch into Ray into the Sky Striker shenanigans. Like following through those loops is like really hard to crack if you try and play for advantage, but you can just get killed over it because you can only summon so many times per turn. Mizuki on Scourge. So then he gets the other trigger. So that's 2. He can get the Fraulein. That's a good thing to get. Targ Who. But it's possible that Mono is on some spicy main deck graveyard hate. Or that. Breakthrough Skill is like a good card. The spicy main deck graveyard hate is very situational, but also very powerful. Because like you can permanently deal with something like a retainer who otherwise has a graveyard effect when it's targeted for the Scarlet Scourge while also negating it. So pros and cons: situationalness versus like extra wider use cases, plus the graveyard effect going on here. Now we see some Shiranui action, and this is like a fairly large Shiranui package. Like, this isn't something that one often sees played in just random zombie decks, even though it's kind of a good card. Like, you can banish zombies from your grave to gain attack, and then banish any monster that battles this card after damage calc. So you can, like, just remove a threat like your, what's it called? Eater of Millions. And Mono is still reading that shenanigans. And also, like, it has high synergy with the whole Shiranui suite of dudes who get effects when banished. Like, this one's one of the more tame ones. You can take a Shiranui in your grave and add it to hand, which is like, it's great. It's like a straight plus, but also you're overloading your like graveyard setup requirement here, because you need the Samurai on board, something that you want to have banished, and then another Shiranui that you want to, or it's like you want something you want to have banished and something that you want engraved to get the banish. And so like it's not as great as one would think. It looks scarier and like it matters more than it often does in practice. But this domain actually does come in clutch, because each time a vampire inflicts battle damage to the opponent, he can just go from really behind on life points, which is one of Fraulein's like actual reasonable weaknesses, to really ahead on life points, and now he's never like, there's no situation in which Mono can like crack through a Fraulein board. So we'll see how much that matters, whether or not one of the other Trinities is on a Mizuki here, or if he has like other graveyard revival. That's pretty good though. Only 2 spells, but using Hornet Drones to get into a Kagari, which is like fairly large, but the Kagari pluses on summon into the Afterburners means that Mono is actually on a relatively frightening amount of cards here. Behold how good this play is. Show me, my friend. Woo! Ouch. That's like one of those minor misplay things where you're like, what the heck? How was I supposed to know? With the vampire domain, like column alignment. I'm not even sure if there was a particular column that he ought to have put that in. But as I was talking about, sort of one of the weaknesses of that top 40 play style is the fact that sometimes you get out-tempoed when you're going in for advantage plays. But that is a great reason to include these low commitment small archetypal suites like Mech Knights here, which you can just slam down multiple large men without having to like heavily build your deck around it, and oftentimes with minimal with like easily fulfilled requirements, and then you can just mash face. So like it's sort of an interesting spot to put these cards, like calling them top 40 when that like they're not particularly top 40 cards, like they aren't bad, but rather what makes them fulfill the niche here is that they are fulfilling a niche, is they do something that the deck as a strategy needs to compete, that like makes it better. And so you can like finding small generic or like archetypal but small enough that you can treat them as generic packages that like bolster your deck's strengths and cover for their weaknesses, help you build a stronger deck overall. So good stuff. I'm not sure what W Train can still do here. He's getting shut out by that Paleo on the back to the front, which seeing that Scarlet Scourge and Fraulein again could have been good. But Mono still has a couple Sky Striker links in his extra to keep making advantage off of this Kagari that was left floating, and W Train is all out of cards except for this Domain, which does count as a card because Familiar and Retainer can send... You can send one vampire card from hand or face-up field to graveyard to summon it from the graveyard. So, we'll see. However, he might just die here. So, rip. He does get a Ray trigger, and that Ray can tag. And then, so that's one summon. Tag would be 2. If it's beat over, the Ray comes back as 3, and then it would be beat over again. But, looks like he fired off the Ray faster to get his own Kagari to add back. This is only 1800, so it can still get beat over. But I guess the Ray tag would be a redeclare anyway, so it doesn't particularly matter. Think. But I mentioned something about possible main deck tech side cards earlier when thinking about the like top 40 Kofo filled deck. But then also again when suggesting that Mono might have it is something like Called by the Grave is actually positioned very well in the meta right now, I think. Like it would have completely wrecked W Train and also wouldn't have lost advantage against Mono here. And like I think this is a fairly clear pattern where you can see again and again that it ends up mattering. So we'll see. Oh, that may be a finisher. Yup. And that's a quick game 1. W Train was just trying to hold for any amount of time. I think Ray's effect might have been once per turn, so it couldn't actually summon again. Not that that card needs to be any better than it already is. Well, while they side, let's check on the chat. The hidden truth. No one said anything else. Not a lot of people watching. I understand that it is fairly late for me and for most of the US, and not a very pleasant time in other areas of the world where we have some Trinity people around. So maybe we'll get some watchers on the YouTube version of this. So subscribe to the channel and you'll see this with a fixed thumbnail and stuff after the live show is done, because it's like set to auto upload. So yeah. I know I have at least a couple people paying attention, because some people in Discord are impressed with Mono's deck name. I agree. It's a good thing to talk about. He also suggested top 40 boogeymen, because I like to whine about the possibility of there being a deck that is like generic good cards that can't be beat by any sort of Trinity limited archetypal pile, which I believe that is a potential worry, even if we might not be at that place now, because like hitting archetypes is so much easier than hitting generic cards, because there will always be more cards that are generic than there are pieces in a top tier archetype, and you can make a deck out of generic cards that are top tier and like mix and match basically in a way where like it doesn't lose very much if you hit the pieces, and like an archetype deck can never exist in the same form again if you just hit the best archetype cards. So it looks like Mono, and I'll talk about the game again, it looks like Mono chose to go first, set some stuff, and now we are seeing Ray put in work instead of the vampire end of things. So Rhoda, Ray, tag for Hayate. I think something interesting to keep in mind here is sending this jamming waves with Hayate and then going into Kagari here to add it back. It's like cool, but there are a couple points of interest. You run into the summon limit, so if your opponent answers the Kagari, then you don't get your Ray back, and you run yourself out of Sky Striker links at a much faster pace. So I agree that it is the correct decision here to leave the Hayate up and force your opponent to try and answer it. In particular, when you know your opponent's just sitting on some back row and reactive stuff instead of like pressuring your life total. Because when this Hayate dies, that Ray's coming back, and then it can tag into Kagari still. And like, I think like just sitting on one Sky Striker link at a time instead of going one into the other is like, you get more advantage out of the Ray recycling than you do the actual search of Sky Striker maneuver cards. So good stuff. But yes, also this is a very important ruling thing. Mech Knight Blue Sky, yada yada, column summons. If this is normal special from hand, you can add Mech Knights from deck to hand equal to number of opponent's cards in this card's column. However, if you Ghost Ogre it, this card is no longer in any column, and so you can add 0 if you want to, which Mono did. But he does have another Mech Knight follow-up. But we can sort of see here, though, like, yes, you can beat over this Hayate for 900, and then the Ray comes back. No Ray effect. Okay, just prove me wrong. I wonder what that's about. I suppose the only reason he would do that is if he already had the Hornet drones in hand, or he's trying to play around hardcore effect negation, or that's another potential. I don't know for sure how good that is. it's obviously like Scapegoats is great. That's not bad. But I believe he could have eked out a little more value by going into like Rei, Kagari, Shizuku instead of trying to do this shenanigans. But I suppose these shenanigans are still pretty effective. May as well do this fancy little play here by declaring a monster type, or wait, yeah, or declaring an attribute specifically with this Indigo Eclipse. So Psychic, Dinosaur, Beast, all Earths, to make Curious here, which slots into the Vampire game plan very well. However, it was never on the field, so rip Curious. And now we might see that playing more aggressively with the Scapegoat there is actually going. It could end up biting W Train here. Like you effectively like raid into Hayate into it got beat over as a -1. Like the jamming waves never got to hand. None of the other Sky Striker links hit the field. You scapegoated, mind controlled your opponent's threat, and then got solemned. So it's been like 1 for 1 with the Solemn, 1 for 1 with the Indigo, -1. And the Scapegoat token doesn't count as hard advantage. But you can see in the card counts. Whereas like Rei alone represents like plus bajillion because each link has a Rei float from grave. 2 links have a search or an add from grave is plus or a search from deck is plus. Ooh, that's savage. Buddy Force is a pretty good card when you're playing a zombie pile here. However, with only beast targets, that is not actually that great right now. So it's like technically minus for mono, but that Buddy Force is also a dead card for the foreseeable future, and so we might see mono just lay down the Indigo beats if W Train doesn't have any follow-up here. But 4 unknown cards could count. The thing is, okay, yeah, I was going to say, unless these set spells and traps are specifically set up spells, they aren't going to be helpful in getting out of this situation. And Foolish Burial, like, it's great. Send Mizuki, send whatever, but we'll see. Sending Vampire Retainer to try and get this vampire shenanigans started is pretty good. So I mentioned in the previous game it can pitch from hand. Looks like not even going to use that effect. Yeah, because it banishes itself after doing so. And instead, you can just Buddy Force the zombie type. Different name. Get a search. Can fetch vampire spells and traps. The other one searches monsters. So we'll see. They have like a theme, Solemn Judgment. They have a good field spell, kind of situational. Several traps. We might just see the one, yeah, that summons a vampire from deck, because you can get Scarlet, which can get back this old Retainer, which can search something else again. And he doesn't quite have the setup to go for Domain, which is like double normal summon. Effect. Oh, looks like the Scarlet Scourge was in hand. Yeah, so we're sort of seeing the results of this. It's like, how long can W Train keep going? This is a really close game though, because the Retainer and Mizuki are like not blank cards in the graveyard. So these two unknown back row have to be very live, because this is a real card. You can fetch like familiar and then like link with it and with whatever it searches. So that's why waiting instead of firing it off in the end phase, because it kills the whatever in the end phase. So also, that's just one of those minor optimizations. Like, this summons from deck, and if you like want to draw, if you're trying to summon familiar from deck and like search something, you sort of want to leave it in because he plays 2 familiar, so he can't draw both. Familiar is a good card, so you want to see it. And if you draw whatever you're going to search with familiar, like that's better, and you can then search something else that presumably combos with that card than just like ripping like some random card. So like you can do these minor ordering optimizations to make sure that you like get slightly more likely to pop off. But looks like W Train not even messing with that for now. Like I said, he's still got a loaded grave, and it looks like Mono is not sitting on anything particularly scary here. So there's that Solemn Judgment card. It's like you have to have a face-up vampire, but you can negate a spell, trap, or monster effect, and like if you negate a monster effect, it you like gain life points equal to the monster's original attack. So, and there's the Fraulein. So this lets him beat over the Indigo Eclipse, but that's summon limit. So even though this has a neat little Goyo Guardian effect, it does not actually work out. Think. I wonder. Maybe it's a battle trap that he's sitting on. Something that he wouldn't activate at this Scourge Retainer shenanigans, but there we go. Yeah, is something you would think about when your opponent's going into battle. This is during damage calculation, so you do not need to pay those life points, because this is on attack declaration, which is long before damage calc. So I will give W a quick message. Send message. Gain 500 LP. You pay in damage step for Frau, but mirror was on deck. So it's possible that I'm misinterpreting the situation and will be corrected here, but it's still better to say something than not. But yeah, so that's sort of rough, because that Frau died in the end phase, and all of a sudden, now W Train is still low on cards, not really as live graveyard, at least without the Mizuki. Retainer still has a useful effect, but it demands other vampire cards. The trap that we saw him search is dead because there are no face-up vampires. And let's see, Scourge effect. Okay. So there is a face-up vampire, which is something. It's like an old one. There were like multiple tiers of vampire release or like support. So like there was Vampire Lord way back when, and Vampire Genesis with a structure deck after that a while. and then like Vampire Sorcerer and Shadow Vampire and Vampire Duke after that, and only very recently Fraulein, Scarlet Scourge, Awakening, and Friends. And Sorcerer was in like that third wave, so it's like good but not like built for the more current format. So it's just like Goblin Zombie. Wait, that is a by your opponent's card. Okay, yeah. So he just used it as a name and then got the retainer search to get Twin Twister fodder and fired it off. What a close game, though. That beater was keeping mono alive, and now the retainer beats are too scary. Oof. Let's see what he does here. Uni effect from deck. Only zombies can attack for the rest of the turn, but in a zombie deck that might not be a very big deal. Oh, and that was the last back row. But this vampire domination, whenever a spell, trap, or monster effect while you control a vampire, boom. Pretty interesting rip there, Chief. You saw him search that. Oh, unless you mean the Unizombie, in which case, yeah, what a rip. Also, it looks like he is playing a second Mizuki, like I theorized he might be. So, level 6 for zombie synchros. There are several. Or just fire off Mizuki at yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, okay. So he wasn't at summon limit. I was thinking he was for a second. He normal Unizombie, then Mizuki'd into Sork, and then made Omega because this card's badonkadonk, and didn't even need to attack there. Like returning the Mizuki to grave is like we just saw him use this Mizuki to make the Omega, and now the Omega has paid for itself. So Mono's better have some good cards, but I would not be surprised if this set was like a Ghost Ogre or a Skarm, which are too slow. Even like a Sangan is kind of too slow. But like the Monster U normal set is not the one that gets you out of this situation. Like, I guess maybe, and I was thinking like if it were a magical scientist, you wouldn't normal set that. However, when you're only on 1,000 life points, you might actually normal set that. So things are looking grim. But yeah, another thing is, if it's a Ray, it might not be a normal set monster either, because you can just normal summon and do Ray shenanigans. Ray effect, tag into Hayate, and then attack directly, I'd think. And then into Shizuku. I'm trying to figure out, like, what's he got for spells. Is there any way to make this Omega swinging over a Sky Striker Link not game? Or I guess he has to go in whatever he adds he can't use. Unless it is a Skarm, maybe, and then it just sends itself to grave. But I do not believe there is a window in which you can... I don't think there's a way. Like, there will always be opportunity for the Omega to tag onto this Afterburners. Yep, there we go. Omega on add. So even if this is a Skarm that he can flip up and send to grave without going over the summon limit to like clear the main monster zones. It's yep. And he realized that that Omega's too big. Let's check on the chat again. Hey, what's the top 40 deck? I mentioned it earlier in the stream. It is Mono's idea of the top 40 cards in the format put into a pile. And I think that is a great way to name it. And there's plenty of advantages to doing that over archetypal stuff. And it doesn't even have to necessarily include archetype or like exclude archetypal stuff, because he's playing Mech Knights, technically named archetype, Sky Strikers, also technically a named archetype. But the thing that sets them apart is that you can play like 3 Mech Knights, and drawing any individual Mech Knight is fine, and drawing the good ones still broken. Same with Sky Strikers. You can play like Rhoda, Ray, Hornet Drones, Afterburners, Jamming Wave, and like drawing any of your 3 Link play starter peoples is like bonkers. But drawing like random Soul Taker with potential upside, or MST with potential upside, is also okay. Whereas we're seeing like W Train here, who can potentially top deck level 5 and 6 monsters that with like need specific graveyard setup or tribute fodder to use. Like you can play. It's about like deck investment, I think. Being able to play the top 40 cards that have minimal deck investment with like no Garnet opportunity cost is like strong and scary. Like Tour Guide. Tour Guide's another one. Like it effectively functions the same, even though it doesn't share an archetype with Sangin, and it technically has a tour archetype, like with Tour Bus. But like drawing Sangin or Skarm is like meh, but like not bad. And like drawing Tour Guide is still just as broken as like nutting with your 1-for-1 into Vampire Familiar. And like we saw him search that DD Crow, which is particularly relevant in this matchup. Looks like he drew the Skarm too. But yeah, as you can see, like this, well, I don't know if he has another target, so it might just been like a mediocre draw. But the fact is, like, Skarm doesn't hold you down as much in this small archetypal package as actually like playing an archetypal strategy does. And so you can just like create a deck that's the top 40, low commitment, like relatively generic, like high advantage control-y cards, and play it, and it's pretty strong. And yeah, it's sort of like interesting because back row is generic, but like most monsters aren't. So like there's some disconnect there, I think, where it like encourages a top 40 deck like this to play more back row in a more control-y style than an archetype deck would, which is one of the things that I'm like apprehensive about, because I always worry about the meta being boring or stale in a way where you can only play one type of strategy. And this is like top 40 can only be built in so many ways, like because good it's like good low commitment cards all function very similarly in a certain sense, because but like different archetypes can do wildly different things. So but yeah, it's probably not too interesting hear my paranoid ramblings about format design. Oh, it's gotta be dark. Excuse me. They might be in voice chat and I missed something. Oh, he's talking about the Scarm. He was like, Scarm! And then, oh yeah, you cannot search your Archfiend Eris, where a tour guide can summon Archfiend Eris. So yeah, it's not that great. And that is allowed. That is a kind of spiky thing to do, but that is allowed when your opponent makes an illegal activation that they can't do because no targets. The opponent's allowed to confirm the deck. So that's useful info for what though, like especially in a format like this where if you can remember what your opponent played last game, you can use what you don't see in their deck to infer what they have in their hand. You aren't playing pack? Oh yeah. He even like discussed this where it's packless pack. That's what he told me at least. This one's interesting. The Wee Witch is buffing all of W-Train's stuff here. But it looks like Mono has a fairly good setup because all he needs is one low commitment floating beat stick and then all of the disruption. This is the DD Crow we saw him search, and W-Train might just sort of flounder because it's like he just had to tribute summon a Scarlet Scourge, and if this gets like negated and destroyed by a back row, like, ooh, that was just a gross 2-for-1. Whew, that's pretty good. It looks like W-Train does know what he's doing in playing through this removal, though. So, Scourge, target Frau. Mono chains DD Crow, target Frau. W-Train chains Buddy Force, targeting Scourge, which he can use to summon the Frau, which makes the DD Crow fizzle. And then the Scarlet Scourge fizzle as well, but it doesn't matter because he like forced through and kept his Frau around. And now Wee Witch's Apprentice is buffing W-Train's board too, and there's a Frau there, so it's not going to stand up to these beats. But we may see a back row here. Or he could just let it go and add back Tour Guide and search for that Archfiend Eris or other non-dark fiend that he was thinking he could nab with Scarm. He takes some damage there, but no Frau effect. Also, this Scourge has an actual good effect. That Goyo thing that we mentioned earlier. Pretty slick. And now it's just buffing W-Train's board alone, because Mono doesn't have a board, but Sangan will help get there, because Ray is a really good target for it. And if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, includes Mono's card effects and his own battles too. So this could get another float potentially, which is one of the risks of using this Goyo effect. Oof. Yeah, that's a pretty brutal hit. So Sangan and Wee Witch trigger here. Look at these nerds. Both are fine. Yeah, that's brutal. Can add back the DD Crow to target that Mizuki and search like a Ray. Or just add back the Sangan. Like, worked once, would work again. Putting in work. Actually, that's 3 Sangan searches, but it looks like he's searching Ray, like I said, and adding back DD Crow, because this Mizuki can summon Scourge, can summon Fraulein again. Whew! Desires. That's sort of like it's obviously a really powerful card that people talk about in the TCG a lot of the time. But in Trinity, it's like a different beast almost, because you only have one of every card, which means that like any deck that even whiffs archetypes that are more than like a handful of cards can't do it without hobbling themselves like every other time. Stealing your girl was a mistake. True. Gosh, this wee witch putting in work. But I was talking about desires. The thing about top 40 is that the cards are intentionally interchangeable. Like, all of them prevent you from dying, disrupt your opponent, and like provide low committal beats in a way that's very generic, such that drawing like Tour Guide and 3 back row is the same as drawing Ray and 3 back row. And any of these back row can be fairly similar. Like Breakthrough Skill is Fiendish Chain is Solemn Warning, and like and like that's what allows this deck to sort of play Pot of Desires and also makes it very resilient to banlist hits, because like if you hit the Ray, there are other things to add. And yes, it'll be weaker, but you can't ever kill this strategy. Did I not discard? Crap, you did not. Okay. It's a good thing that you two are paying attention, because I was busy rambling, so... That Twin Twisters is pretty good, but Lost Wind is one of those pieces of back row that are like super strong, because it double taps. Like it's sort of like Breakthrough Skill. Because it has a grave effect, you don't care that much when it's sent to the grave. Looks like that last card is a Gozuki, which represents one more send. And so Mono has the DD Crow, 1 unknown back row, and then 2 cards in hand. One of which is Ray. Yeah, so he has the DD Crow, the Ray, and then 2 unknowns, unless I missed something else. But the DD Crow can like answer one of these Mizukis, or like what it tries to summon. And then there's a second Mizuki, and now that this Gozuki has like done its thing, it's effectively a 1700 vanilla, which will lose to that Ray and whatever it does. So if Mono has opted to bring in Shark Cannon and any of his other cards are like not useless, I think that this is about over. Yeah, pushing for extra damage here by using the afterburners on something that you technically could have like Ray into Shizuku, beat over, add an end phase is probably worth it, because he's like effectively cornered W Train. Like this is a situation where you want to... That's interesting. Maybe he didn't bring in the Shark Cannon. That would have been like a true checkmate situation, in my opinion. But sometimes just overwhelming your opponent with the card advantage also does it, because he can hold on to that DD Crow for as long as he likes, and because like even if one of the Mizukis summons the Scourge or tries to, then the other Mizuki doesn't have the Scourge to target, and like it loses out on a lot there. So even though it would have been like maximum neato to go DD Crow and Shark Cannon on both Mizukis. But yeah, see, so now we're sort of like left to think about this, because if he fires off the DD Crow on the Gozuki here, the other Mizuki can get Scourge and Fraulein and like beat in. So even though this Mizuki banish summons Gozuki, the Gozuki can then send something else, replacing this Mezuki, so it's effectively free. And if his in-hand card is something useful, he's like not out of it yet. But then again, there's a Widow Anchor waiting in the wings, so that's 3 spells. It's possible that W Trains just needs to check his deck, like take a look if there's any way out of this situation, because this is not a good one to be in. Let's check on the chat while he checks his deck. Spiked. Yeah. Oof. So just sending Unizombie here, I think, is not a good sign. Like, I don't think that there's any like line of play here that doesn't lose coming out of this. Like, Mezuki on Unizombie, that's nice. Unizombie can send again, but Chain DD Crow. And so, like, this card has to be Book of Life, basically. Which would be pretty good. Ooh. Oh, that's something, I guess. Ray, if a face-up Sky Striker Link monster you control, and it has to be leave the field by card effect, not just leave the field. So, now we're seeing the true Sky Striker shenanigans, where W Train can go into his own Sky Striker. Hayate, swing in, Kagari, add back whatever he sent. Thankin'. Oh man, if this is Mirror Force again. Nope. Sending Ray. Well, I mean, that's pretty clearly a thing. Like, this is going like into Shiz here, and then getting a search, and then having the Ray engrave. You still run into summon limit shenanigans, where if this is like a summon stopper, but it was not. And I think that's a good read to make when your opponent is like KK, 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 and then you enter battle phase, and then they're like, think. Like, that's a pretty strong read that it's a battle trap there, because if it weren't, then they would have thought at different moments and be like, at least there's probably some battle component there. Searching Hornet Drones is pretty interesting, but does he have anything else? Because that Shizuku isn't like a game on board, I don't think. It makes the opponents lose, so those were très grueling. Yes, that is true. Unban Zombie World, you swine. No, just because you asked nicely. I may have missed something about why this board in particular is actually game, instead of just W Train is in trouble and can't like defend anymore because we know his in-hand card, but like technically I think he could jump with it. But maybe someone will enlighten me afterwards, and or in the chat here. So yeah, then thanks to everyone for joining me. I know it was a few less than usual, but I'm certain we'll get those views, and yeah, so good luck to these competitors in future rounds, and bye-bye. I'll leave this on for another minute. Then, yeah, so it doesn't do the lag thing. It was a fiendish, next-level thinking Bates. Sangan is known info in hand. Oh, yeah. Excuse me, where you... Oh, you probably just caught it, the end. But, like, sir, watching the stream while you're playing, that's a chat. Okie dokie.